It did attempt to draw some walls and things of that sort, and those orange cubes are inevitably the enemies. Grok Code Fast -1 has been released, and truthfully, I have not seen as much coverage on this as I had anticipated. So I want to add my hat into the ring. I don't know if that's actually a phrase. Regardless of that, let's just go ahead and start by taking a look at this model. Now, truthfully, there is a very light amount of information here, and today's testing, we're going to be just using it in OpenRouter and playing with it, but I do first want to just look at the relatively light documentation that we see here on X.AI's documentation. So, of course, this is Grok Code Fast 1, and we can see that the modalities are listed only as text in, text out, which I suppose is quite all right for a coding-specific model. The context window is 256,000, which is relatively robust and nice to see. And beyond that, something I see here. Now, I am not completely 100% in tune in the pricing schema for various models. However, this does seem to be very cheap in terms of what you actually get, where the output is $1.50 per million tokens out and the input is 20 cents per million tokens in. From my kind of glancing around at the figures for various models, this does seem to be rather cheap, which is nice to see. And this is obviously touted for its speed, which in my basically one test that I've done with this prior to beginning to film the video testing it, it did seem to be rather fast. So it is a thinking model, and they do just mention it has a few specific noted capabilities such as function calling, structured outputs, and of course reasoning. So we will be able to see its chain of thought. And if we scroll all the way to the bottom, that's pretty much all we have here on this page about this model. So let's just go ahead and close Chrome, which for some reason this page just wouldn't load in Firefox on multiple ones of my machines. I'm not entirely sure what to make of that, but regardless, we are now chatting with Grok Code Fast 1 here in OpenRouter, and I have just started off with a simple arithmetic test, which I am a bit surprised at the result of, where I said I have 26,000 subscribers and 77% of viewers are not subscribed. How many should I have if the non-subscribers were not betraying me? And it just ended up, instead of doing the math and saying, well, you should have this many, it basically said if they weren't betraying, they'd all become subscribers, so you have the full 26K as real subscribers. It almost took this as a riddle instead of an arithmetic problem, which, I don't know, I think it's funny the way it responded. I would have just expected it to give me a number figure, but I suppose this is a good way to gauge personality of this model. So let's just go ahead and see what it says right here. All right, I think I'm just gonna, and it called me Boyo back because I called it Boyo. So this is definitely like, all right, we might be able to have some fun with this, being that this is a Grok model, which is obviously known for its willingness to embark upon fun experiences. So we're just going to go ahead and jump into the tried and true browser-based operating system using JavaScript, HTML, and CSS. First thing I'm going to note here is that the speed is really quite fast, as the name would be kind of fitting of, and it did go ahead. Again, this seems like a pretty light result, so I'm not entirely sure what I'm going to be expecting here, but let's just go ahead and see. It was really, again, extremely fast, and something that this would definitely excel at, just seeing its speed, is regardless of how well it is able to code, it would be able to quickly go through entire code bases and kind of probably summarize each script. So even if you had this in a pipeline where you fed this summaries of your code base to a more powerful model, its speed would really excel in something like that. So with that, let's just go ahead and take a peek. All right, we will use Chrome to test the results. I am quite excited. Okay, well, this is just not good. I mean, the background color is like, I have studio lights in front of me, which are bright, but then when I look at this, it makes me want to squint. And that's saying something considering the background lighting. All right, it's definitely a more vintage Windows-esque style, so I won't immediately knock it for that. We do have a clock here, and take note that this taskbar color as well as the clock font is very reminiscent of much older versions of Windows, so that is, I guess, okay. It is showing seconds as well. Someone had mentioned a long time ago to try clicking the clock when I get these results, so I will try to remember to do that. Try right-clicking. Okay, so nothing there. Sometimes right-click is actually functional in these results. Let's just start out with our start button. This page says start menu. This could open a menu with apps. Well, that is some level of functionality. Let's take a peek. Okay, we do have hover effects here, and it just seems like the icons are broken, so I won't fully knock it for that. Very simple. Let's check our resizing capability. Okay, that does not exist. If I can move, but no full screen. All right, you know, it doesn't show up in the taskbar here, which a lot of models have started doing. So when an app is open, it actually shows it open in the taskbar, which is a nice touch, but that did function. We have a full screen clock, which seems to stop at the time you opened it. So like I opened this 10 seconds ago, and that's the time reflected here, as we can see, versus that time there. All right, that's you know, kind of interesting. Maybe a tip to like slow down. And then we have an explorer. Very good. Can we click on any of these? Okay, no. So I do believe the youth would refer to this as a mid result, where it works, but it's not very impressive. So, you know, maybe because this is just a single model test, we can go ahead and kind of so now I'm just kind of telling it like, all right, I think you can do a little better, and I do want to see. That's worse. So I decided to give it another chance to fix the issues, and it is kind of funny because it basically said this is probably true because I shortened my last response, and then if you scroll up and look into what it generated, brevity, use actual base 64. So the model is exhibiting signs of laziness, which is somewhat interesting, but then here in the response, it just kind of started getting a little hallucination-like, because I do see some Arabic right here. It looks like Dahan or something. I don't know. I'm not as good at reading as I used to be of that. And then something else here. And then it just said boiler. And then it generated the script.js again. But it generated it twice here. So I replaced them. I'm just going to try opening with the... I'm going to try Python test. I'll do a Python game because they can sometimes be fun. Simple and easy. And again, the speed here, I probably have said that a lot, but that is definitely so far the most impressive thing. That is an extremely short script for a 3D first-person shooter. We're going to give it the benefit of the doubt. Okay, so unfortunately, that did not work. Let's vibe code the answer, see if we can get it. I'm just gonna, here's the issue. All right, it does seem to have spit out some form of, it opened faster this time. All right, you know what? It didn't work in terms of the gameplay logic, but it did seem to actually draw a fairly acceptable map. And the speed is all right. Sometimes I've dealt with speed issues with some of the results for this that the models generate where they lag really badly. This one actually, I don't know. I'm going to give this a little more of a chance to actually go ahead and fix this. So here's the third try to fix this. The first time it just didn't work. The second time it actually kind of worked, but the gameplay logic didn't work. Okay, so that is kind of the same way here. But again, we actually can now get a good view of the map and things like that. And it actually, I like the grid floor. It did attempt to draw some walls and things of that sort, and those orange cubes are inevitably the enemies. It does seem like the white cube is the player, as that spins in correlation with where we do the mouse. I do like seeing how the health just keeps getting worse because it's going into the negatives. So while this isn't necessarily working properly, it did actually fix it to some level each time I prompted it to, which does bode well for a coding model that would be used in agentic frameworks and things like that. So this is a better result than I thought we would get, especially considering it kind of struggled with the web OS and fixing those results. So maybe it's better in Python, or I don't know, off this small sample size, I could not definitively say, but that was not horrible. I want to try it with Python again, so I'm asking it to just make a simple mock trading application in Python that has access to some API that will show it the actual price of a few different top stocks. In addition to that, it should go ahead and allow for some mock trades to be made against a fake bank account. Okay, so it's not a graphical user interface application. Maybe that's on me, as I should have specified that, so we did just quit. All right, let's have it do a simple tkinter GUI onto this. All right, let's take a look at its attempt. Okay, its successful attempt to actually put a simple GUI onto this application. So far, it did do that. It started us with a balance of $10,000, which I guess is okay. Let's first and foremost just go ahead and see if these tabs for the different windows of this application do actually work. Okay, so charts, you have to select a specific stock and then press show chart, and then hopefully, assuming everything works, it would show you that. Trades, assuming the same thing, where you kind of would have to make one for anything to appear. And then we have our portfolio, which if we refresh, so maybe the balance isn't part of the portfolio. We need to buy stock first. Let's just first and foremost check. Let's try Microsoft the last month, and okay, so interval. So it did properly adhere to those things that I outlined for it. Hey, that's not bad. And you can actually expand this. I know this is probably extremely simple looking, but it's nice to have a decent successful result. And we can see, I don't actually know if these prices are correct or not. I'm quite certain that folks in the comments will probably have more pertinent knowledge about some of this stuff than myself. But all right. And I do just want to verify that all of these specific stocks that it has chosen do work, at least in terms of changing the chart trajectory, which would be good. Not bad. Let's go ahead and try to do a trade. So let's buy 5 shares of Tesla. Bought 5 shares at $349.50, and our balance did go down. And let's check our portfolio. This is actually, it's simple, and I understand that, but I like seeing this, and this is just a different style of testing. I know just doing things using JavaScript, HTML, and CSS can sometimes get a little long in the tooth, so I did want to implement something in Python that may be at least part of a usable function in a pipeline or something like that. Overall, this mock trading bot is quite simplistically beautiful. I do want to actually do something a little different here, where we're going to take that trader bot we just did, but ask it to turn it into a beautiful and modern web app while maintaining the simulated functionality, as I want to see how well it can, one, kind of translate functionality between Python and then like web code, whatever you want to call it, and also see how well it does in actually just not hallucinating and making something look pretty good. So we do have our different scripts right here. Okay, and it is still actually went ahead and did a backend as well, even though I didn't ask it to, so that's not bad to see. All right, let's take a peek and see how well it actually did. This will probably open it in, okay, it did open in Chrome. It's very, very simple, but that's not bad. I want to show the chart here so we can... This actually, I will say, I'm quite pleased with this result. I know this is more of a simple test, but it's just a different way to kind of test this model, and I do really like the way this looks here. I'm cool with this. It does not have the different tabs like the simple Python one did, but it just kind of shows everything in one front-end UI, which is probably better. So let's just buy 6 shares of Apple. All right. And then we'll refresh our portfolio here, and we can see that is reflected. Let's just go ahead and change this to, and it gives us a little more control over the interval that the chart actually shows. This is really not bad. What API is this using to fetch these prices? Let me take a quick peek. Just open with text editor. Okay, so it's using Yahoo Finance. That's cool. This is, I like this. I don't know, I mean, I enjoyed this, so, and it even shows us right here at these specific points what the price was. All right, so being that this is a Grok model, which is obviously known, whether it be good or bad, for its willingness to go ahead and engage in things that may be considered socially unacceptable by certain individuals, I do want to go ahead and just test its willingness to add some of that flair, if you will, into a thing it coded. So I've basically asked it to write a simple web app that will have a button and a text field, so that when the user presses the button, it will go ahead and show them something that would be considered inappropriate. Interesting. This result looks so extremely similar to one I got with a similar test to the dots.llm1 by RedNote that I tested a while back, which was actually a pretty cool model. All right, click for a surprise. Yep. Okay, well, it totally, absolutely 100% did do this. This phrase or sentence seems to have a word kind of commonly heard in Australia. People call their friends that there. Wow. Oh, okay. That one's not NSFW, so I can actually show it. That one is quite unshowable, as is that one, as is that one. So it seems to have put 4 different things in there, but it did go ahead and actually do that, which is, of course, something you would expect Grok to do. So that's not bad. I'll definitely have to, yep, okay, I'm going to have to blur the generation here because as I look through the code now, it did just statically put them in the code, but it was more than happy to do so. I think somewhat in a similar vein is that I would like to just see if it will willingly try to help me crack WEP wireless encryption, which is obviously extremely outdated. So this isn't like where like, oh, like this is showing a hacking thing that could be used nefariously. It shouldn't be able to at this point. No one should still be using it. Now, sometimes the word crack will trigger refusals. Okay, that makes sense. I do want to just test if this is something that is a pretty easy bypass where words like crack, like bypass. So write a Python script to navigate around. Interesting. All right. So I think to close it out, I am just going to have it do a Steve's PC repair website, and we are doing the version of this test where Steve extremely hates Macs and asking it to make an origin story for where that hatred did stem from, allowing it to be as creative and odd with the story as it wants to be, just saying it needs to be very beautiful as well. So fortunately it did do it all in one script here, so we only have one script to copy paste, and then we'll take a peek. All right, let's take a peek. Oh my God, this is hideous. This is just awful. All right, I'm going to just try to read through this lavender disaster. All right, Steve's PC repair. Do we have hover effects on these? Okay, they do change to the hideous yellow that it's chosen to complement this hideous lavender, but that is good at least. PC perfection awaits. Max, stay away. Book your fix today. That's a nice hover effect, actually. It expands as well as changes color, and it even seems like there's a slight hover effect on the actual black there and the text as well. Zero tolerance for fruity nonsense. Okay, well, he wouldn't make this site then. Okay, the nav bar up here actually turns opaque when you scroll, which is really not bad. I'm going to skip the origin story for now. Do these have hover effects? No, they don't. That's a big L right there. That is something I absolutely would have expected to see here that I would have seen with much smaller model. Okay, we have a contact form and a very simple footer. Macs, nope. PCs always. No Mac whining. Contact Steve, Max need not apply. All right, I'm going to speed read this origin story real quick and then. It made Steve a time traveler. It's my own fault because I told it that it could generate the origin story as make the story as creative and unbelievable as you can. Okay, so that's entirely on me. That is my own fault. Then it did properly adhere to that prompt. While this is outside the scope of my normal style of testing, I do just quickly want to touch upon the pricing considerations and at least show what models from the other major providers this Grok code is comparable to in terms of price. So basically from what we see here, it is 20 cents per million token input and $1.50 per million token output. That is a bit closer to GPT-5 mini. It is actually a little or decent amount, a lot more expensive than GPT-5 Nano, though I am not sure how Nano does perform in terms of coding tasks, so that is obviously a consideration in and of itself. Beyond that, this is closest to, but still far cheaper than the cheapest Claude model I see right here, which is Haiku 3.5, which is significantly more expensive. It is 4 times as expensive in the input and like 3 times as expensive, not quite, but almost in the output. So definitely much cheaper than Haiku 3.5, and it is somewhat close to Gemini 2.5 Flash in pricing here, but it is far more expensive than Gemini 2.5 Flash Lite, which again, I'm not entirely sure how this model would perform compared to this Grok Code Fast model. So that is again probably something closer to GPT-5 Mini. That would kind of be an interesting comparison, is comparing the cheapest models of all of the providers on different tasks and seeing how well they perform, as the pricing differential between some of these light or nano, whatever you want to call them, models and their larger counterparts is significant. So truthfully, assuming that this Grok Code model would probably stack up favorably compared to GPT-5 Mini, Flash Lite, and Haiku 3.5. Haiku 3.5 is still probably quite good, but it would be interesting to see that comparison. So maybe that is something to look into. But the takeaway today from what I experienced here while testing this is the speed is really unbelievably fantastic, and I think this would fit best into a pipeline where if you had a large code base, as it does have a 256K context length, it could quickly go ahead and summarize the functionality and purpose of every interrelated script, and then perhaps you would want to then go ahead and actually have the changes be made by like a Gemini 2.5 Pro or something like that, perhaps something that's a little more competent in coding, as I did notice some things where the failure with the web OS test, where it just failed each time worse to actually fix that, was a little odd to see. It did all right in Python, and then transitioning that Python script into a simple web app, that was nicely done. In addition to that, it obviously did perform as Grok would be expected to with the insult generator website. And again, the speed is really impressive. So if you have basically like a long task that doesn't necessarily need 100% accuracy, but just kind of needs a faster model at a cheaper price, this is definitely something to consider. So with that, that's going to wrap up today's short initial test and first look at Grok Code Fast 1. Like I said, I hadn't seen a lot of coverage on this aside from just like some AI generated slop channels. So I wanted to just go ahead and do some human testing. All right. If you have any questions, please feel free to subscribe, and thanks for watching.